Please, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so the last meeting we looked at how AI and data engineering can automate auditing and the validation of asset and handover information, so supporting golden thread requirements. We looked at key use cases, including the automated checking of O&M documentation, identifying missing information, and validating asset data against requirements. It was emphasized that AI only works effectively when supported by structured data, consistent classification, and standardized taxonomies. We saw some examples looking at how AI can analyze documents, images, surveys, and operational data to identify defects and improve compliance monitoring. So our aim is to look at guidance, or to actually build ourselves a collaborative ecosystem and reusable tools to improve life cycle asset information management and to reduce risk across the built environment. Okay, George, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so right. It's only been 2 weeks since the last meeting, but there's a lot happened. Um, there's a few people here, I think. Let me see, we've got 36 people. That's very good. And a number of people are new. So I think it's probably worth me just explaining what we're trying to do here, and then to see where you can fit into this. So the principle of what we're trying to do is to look at the overall, we're looking at the information management side of the golden thread as being a means of improving the process. And in particular, because we're BIM in asset management, it's about how we can get better information flowing through from design and construction into operations, but also to be able to then keep it up to date, because that seems to be one of the big challenges. And along that sort of journey, what we've been doing is we've had a number of different work streams, all of which have got some common areas. And because of that, we've spun off a couple of different activities which we can use to make the job easier, whether it's work that's being done in schools and universities, or in residential, or in healthcare, for example, which are the three main ones that we've picked out as being key for most of a lot of the users, a lot of the people are involved with. So as part of that exercise, we've had workshops, which we record every one. We've had 3 this week, for example, already. We had one on Monday, which was education, which several of you attended. We've had one on Tuesday, which was residential. And yesterday we had one on healthcare. And in each of them, what we've been doing is showing examples of how better information can make the job easier. We're also we're including in our sort of ecosystem a number of other software companies as well. So ActivePlan obviously is one, but we've got other software companies that are working collaboratively with us, quite a few of them now. We've got people like Mortar, which is used quite a lot by various different contractors for doing task information delivery plans and things like that. So Mo from Mortar's been supporting what we're doing, and in fact we've actually got a site set up that's dedicated for BIM and asset management for us to do some things on. One of the exciting things for me is that last Friday we got real traction with one of the big commendatory environment companies, Procore, and they're introducing us to some of their clients as well. So I think we're getting some very interesting traction. We know a lot of the other companies as well. We're already working collaboratively with people like Open Space and the like. But Multivista, we've got a project that will probably at the forum meeting in end of March, towards the end of March, we can show in that area. But what I wanted to do, the point about this group is to feed off what we're already doing with the various different activities, and really use AI and data engineering to basically glue things together. So I wanted to just show you a couple of slides that set the principle of what we're trying to achieve, because within BIM and asset management, we've got a fantastic community of people who are experts in various different things. And what we want to try and do is bring together people that can actually deliver solutions, are already ready to work together and have agreed to work together, so that there's no exposure then from the client's perspective. But also in the group, we've got people that have got needs. And if we can understand what the client's needs are, we can bring those together with people that have got some tested solutions, and we end up with something that is really coherent. So that's partially a major part of what I think we're trying to do with the Golden Thread Task Force. The idea of this is that we then end up in a situation where we can have everybody using classified libraries, standard taxonomy, standard processes wherever possible. And that makes it a lot easier for people to actually produce a golden thread brief, to be able to use modeling applications, reality capture, cost and inspection apps, and also asset management. Because if we can do that, then it means that everything's going to plug together a much more easily, not just a handover, but in the longer term as well. So for some reason, the Teams is delaying quite heavily. How that's re-rendering. So, but this is where we're trying to go now. Where does that sit with AI and data engineering? Well, we're already doing a lot of work as Active Plan using AI to basically process information, and I think most people are experimenting with it in that way. But what we've done over the last probably 2 months is we've applied it to some very interesting challenges, largely around O&M. So the reason O&M is coming to the fore is that it's clear that there's a lot of things that we need from an asset management point of view that never get put in any models. The way they're normally delivered is in the form of documents in an O&M. Now, whether we think that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's the reality. So what we're trying to do is use the technology to be able to, in some ways, reverse engineer information that is being delivered in documents and turn it into machine readable information that can then be audited more easily and glued together. So last month, or a couple of weeks ago, we showed some examples of that. We had a fantastic example from a company that was using AI to do reviews of condition of materials. I don't know, I can't remember the chap's name. It was Alexander, I think it was. He was on the call last time. Oh no, it's anyway. I sorry about this. I forgot, but
it was me, Carl.
Carl, that's it, Carl Magnus. Yeah, so you can perhaps, if you wouldn't mind, Carl, uh, we can take a look at that, because that, I have to say, we were impressed. So I think I think that could be a good thing to do. So the purpose of this is to bring together people that are pushing the envelope, and also people that are doing some things that, are relatively straightforward, just with Copilot and ChatGPT. So we can bring together people that have got a need for solutions with people that have got the technical expertise to pull those together. So, yeah, I'll pause there for a moment and just ask if anybody's got any comments or observations. You can tell us maybe how you are using AI or data engineering. I mean, they're very similar areas of output. They're just techniques to get there. Um, okay, over to the group. Pierre.
Just to kick off, I think, George, what's really important, we've got new technologies in a number of different areas. So information delivery specification, IDS, as an example. I think what's really important for everybody to understand is to start writing down what are the checks that they're looking at. What's the data? What does it look like? Is it a big long string? Is it a little number? And the reason behind that is it starts formalizing the way that you think of how do you check that out. You're looking for this little string and it does all the things. So that's just a quick kick.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Any other observations? If you don't volunteer, we'll probably pick on you. Carl Magnus.
Yeah, just to say, I agree with the aforementioned. Defining what you're looking for. So what does good look like? Even with AI, AI can do anything, and we're seeing that day by day. It is capable of a lot of things, but we need to define what does a good process look like, because just digitizing a broken process doesn't make it a good process suddenly. We need to fix the process first, and we need to fix the marking criteria in many cases. And in the PFI example, it is often about, well, we can automate an AI system to interpret very vague language and very old contracts in a certain way that will then lead to a lot of distress and discussion. It is, how can we use that tool to actually come up with a collaborative solution of, okay, this contract is, I don't know, 30 years old. It is very vague when it defines scuffs on walls or broken ceiling tiles or whatever it might be. How can we now, with the technology that we have nowadays, then work together to define, okay, what is actually condition B or condition C? How can we define these checklists and what do we need to be looking out for? Because only then you can really, not really automate, but streamline a lot of processes. But we see that the human manual way of doing things has its limitations. Henceforth, you only do a 10% job on it, because a 100% job would take you 30 years. Yep. But we can't just use AI to do that 10%. We then need to define, okay, what would a 100% job look like? And AI can then do that in 3 minutes. But we first need to put some thinking down as to, okay, given that compute and intelligence is getting more available, accessible, let's think about how we redevelop the process itself.
I think you and Pierre have summed up where I want to get to with this. I mean, one of the things that we're trying to achieve is to be able to use AI in a proper, most effective way, rather than using it on unstructured information, and then you're making it really work hard. And that has a couple of different things. One is that it's taking up far more resource than anybody would ever need. But also it means that there's more opportunities for it to make mistakes. Whereas if we can filter that down, if we can use the expertise that's in this group to be able to define what good looks like, then it means that we're more likely to get the right answers. The other thing is that if we can, as Pierre was saying there, if we can structure information, so what we're actually doing is acting on information that is already quite good, then that means that we can we're going to be far more productive. Now, it may well be, and I think it is at the moment, most of the information that's handed over, certainly in terms of O&Ms, is not very well structured. Now, if we can get into a situation where we can use a combination of data engineering and AI to get it into the right structured set, and we can then feed that back into supply chains so they understand what good looks like, it means that everybody can start to improve the process. If we can also use some tools to be able to automatically check if things are right or wrong, and then feed that back quickly to the authors, then if they know that things are being checked, they're probably going to be more receptive to do it properly. But also, it's going to make it easier for them. So yeah, Chum.
Yes, my observation is, the most AI conversation in construction focus on auditing documents at the end of the projects, but the real opportunity is is using AI much earlier in the process during design and procurement stages. So the asset information is generated automatically, and the handover package, is effectively completed before the construction finishes. Otherwise, the AI is just a damage control tool.
I would entirely agree with you, and I think that's really what we've spent years trying to achieve. And I'm not saying we ought to give up on that at all, quite the opposite. But if we can embed in the process some tools that can automatically test things at different stages earlier in the process, we get something that I was taught years ago is called progressive validation.
Yeah. So one more thing I'd like to add is, a close friend of mine he works for a tier 1 contractor. When he handed over the big hospital project recently, the O&M, there are folders there, no documents. He couldn't find anything.
That's in a new building.
Yeah, new hospital. Yeah, a tier 1 contractor. And the problem is, people, there are especially subcontractors who do the work. Halfway through here and there, they go bust, so they're not paid. That's another reason, is that the document wasn't submitted in the first place, because, the original design intent was by the architect, engineer, happy days, done, dusted. But especially subcontractor under the principle, they come in with a different system. And if they go bust, all the, the golden thread we're talking about, there are no threads even. We're even talking about fragmentation. That file don't even, those files don't even exist in the first place. So this leads to the procurement solutions. When people not getting paid, they're introducing a different system due to the competitive tender. That destroys everything.
Yep. Yeah. So just to reinforce that, that's a really important point. And one of the things that I was speaking with an insurance specialist, Mike Chambers, who's also part of our group, and he's very willing to contribute his expertise in this area. I was talking with him on Friday, and he puts contracts together for both projects and also clients. And what he is advising clients to do is for them to have the contract rather than rely on the insurers, on the contractors' insurers. Because what happens is that there's a cascade of people being insured. But of course, if that, as you say, if that specialist subcontractor goes bust, then what's the value of that insurance? So it's almost like a pyramid that things are based on. So what he's recommending to his clients is for the major, or the principal, as he calls it, to actually hold the insurance, which actually fits quite well in with the work that we've been doing over the years on project insurance and things like that.
Yeah, I've been working on the
good,
lender
okay.
side. Yeah, anyway, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just saying, Tim, sorry, you've been waiting for a while.
Right, thank you.
Go on,
Yes,
Tim.
I totally agree that this is about getting it right back to the source, and also you've got the challenges of, you know, whether they're getting paid or not. If you make it, we've got to make it cheap enough for them to be able to do it well, because at the moment all we're doing is saying we're going to test you, but you're going to be tested on something that you are you're not equipped to be able to deliver anyway. So it's almost like a company, you're bound to fail unless we can get these tools into their hands to say, this is how you use these tools to do this. So as you know, George, we've done data extraction out of technical submittals and manufacturers' product information sheets to turn it into essentially coding. Now, that's all well and good, but when you marry that with, here's the requirement of what we're looking for, not just fields that fill this, then you've got, yes, now you've got a tool that does the extraction and tells you where the holes are and says, but this is guaranteed, it's now going to go up the chain. And if it's quick and simple to do, because when in those days when we were looking, and we went to lots of meetings, didn't we, where, you know, Kobe was being presented and IFC and all this sort of thing. And a friend of ours, Matt Parker, used to say, you could see the fear in people's eyes in the audience. And they were going, I'm not going to say anything because for fear of looking stupid. So we've got to make it simple for the person at the coalface. That is really where you've got the problems of the commercialization of the work that everybody does being given almost free. But then what we're doing is saying, these are the techniques you use. Here's some sample prompts, play with it, try it. You can do it yourself to get to these outcomes. Then we might have a start of making this easier for people to say, I didn't know it was that easy. If I'd known it was that easy, I wouldn't have just run around, found a file and throw it at you. I would have taken it and said, yeah, that's what we're using. Now we're just putting it through that process. So we give them the file plus the data and off we go.
Yeah, I think you've made a very important point there. And, you know, I was talking with Andrew Handley, who's one of our colleagues, yesterday. And part of the challenge is, how do we make this carrot and stick? Because the fact is that what we need to do right at the outset is make it easy for people to get it right. So therefore, the employer's information requirements and the asset information requirements need to be clear enough for everybody to understand what everybody's signing up to, but also make it simple for those requirements to be consumed by the various different people that are being asked to deliver it. And part of that process is to make it all machine readable. And I'm just going to ask Franco to just step in here, because one of the fundamental things that we need to do with that is make sure that everybody's talking the same language. And so, Franco, could I just hand over to you for a moment?
Yes. Well, first of all, I am 100% with everything that was said so far. I wanted to add one little adjective to what we've said, which in my opinion is one of the biggest challenges. So let's say that we have cracked the challenge of, you know, using a common language. Let's say that we have structured the data properly. The last bit, and last but not least, we have to separate, segregate relevant data for O&M and non-relevant data for O&M. This is very simple to say, but not simple to. This is, I think, one of the areas where we have to really make an effort, because I don't even know how AI, or if AI could really resolve this need to separate.
I think it can help, Franco. So there's a piece of work that we showed yesterday that Tim's done on some help desk information, and that tells you what on a help desk, we did an analysis. Tim's used AI to do an analysis of 13,000 records that have been recorded. And what that does, it tells you what went wrong and therefore what information was needed. So that helps. I'm not saying it answers the question, Franco, but it helps because it's actually determining what information is needed from a reactive maintenance perspective.
Yes, no, I understand, but let me try to make myself clearer. When each element of data and information is generated, at that point, you must break it into two: useful, not useful.
Agreed.
Right? Have you ever seen this Japanese guy, I think, that understands chicks, the female male? Have you ever seen how these people do it? Okay, it's unbelievable. They can handle thousands of them, and they understand which one is a male, which one is a female. We have to put something like that in place with information.
Fantastic. Thank you, Franco.
Okay.
Kevin.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, just commenting on the points that Chun made, which I totally agree with. It's very often the case within construction that, again, sort of value design, as it's called, but is often down to whoever is the cheapest, means that many of the subcontractors, will decide to forfeit the final 5%, 10% and just walk away. And all the O&M data is then left to someone else to pick up. And I think that's, again, taking your point, George, about it's important to reinforce the AIR, the OIR early on, and to explain what that means precisely, not just take something from a textbook, but to say the AIR for this particular project is, this, and then set it all out in detail. And I also agree with what Franco said. I see AI as the icing on the cake. It can do things that are very, very helpful and very useful, but it's only going to process a very small amount of the data. You're still going to have to process all of the other stuff manually, and it involves, meeting with humans and talking to humans and humans understanding one another. And I think that's largely where it's falling down at the moment. And also when you get past the handover, because we're only talking really about up to the point of the construction project finishing, you've then got 30 years of trying to manage all that data concurrently in order to maintain the golden thread. And I think that's also where AI comes in, that you've got to get the data down to the correct operational minimum at the point of handover, taking Franco's point, and then manage what's left during the operational phase of the building. And that's about linking into the CAD systems, the CAFM system, and all the other bits that come into that, to try and make it easy and not too people heavy.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we've found is that there's a lack of understanding in the design and construction community that the project doesn't finish when the building is handed over. Actually, it's only just starting then. Right. And what happens as far as the FM teams are concerned, which you know better than anybody, there's hundreds of small projects going on, and some of them bigger than small, but there's hundreds of projects going on that need to be treated in the same way, where information about regulation 38, for example, that needs to be delivered. The fire safety information needs to be delivered by the asset team to the people that are carrying out the work so it can be done safely. And then they need to take that information or take back the information and feed it back in. So we've got constantly little projects going on that need to be auditable. And one final thing, I'll hand over to you in a second, Vic. One final thing on that came out last week that I've become a bit excited about, and my colleagues will probably give testament to this, and that is that one of the directors from Arcadis, who's is a technical director, head of quality and health and safety, he said to me when we were showing him some of the errors that we were coming across, some of the gaps, some of the defects that we were coming across in the O&M handover, which Tim's going to show you some examples of in a bit. He said, well, that's the basis of a claim under defect liability. So you should be able to recover the cost of that remediation from from probably retentions.
Yeah, but only if the contractor still exists at that point, George.
No,
That was the point that Chun was making. Many of these people have gone to the wall by the time you get to that point. By the time you get into the LAD.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, and that's why we need to progressively do the validation during as Chun was saying earlier, progressively we shouldn't be waiting until the end, right? But what I'm saying is, we are where we are. If there's a project that's been handed over, which we've got several that we've audited recently, where we've actually identified that they're within a year, so they're in the defects liability period. There should be the opportunity to either get the supply chain to correct the information that wasn't right, or alternatively pay somebody to do it. And this group, if you like my original graphic of the task force, being able to bring together people that have got the expertise to actually, as Franco's saying, define what's important, and also then unpick information. That's the sort of community that I'm trying to engender here. Vic.
Yeah, hi George. Yeah, I think just picking up on what Franco said as well with regards to deciding what's useful and not useful. If we're doing prompts on the LLMs, on whichever one we're using, are we trying to get to that stage where it's only the useful information that we're gathering? So yeah, I mean, we do that now, don't we? We sort it out what's useful and not useful, but are we trying to get to the stage where we've got the prompts for the large language model that we're going to use to make sure that we're only getting the relevant information? That's where we're trying to get, isn't it?
Yeah,
gathering.
In principle, yes. Yeah. And the prompts can be designed in such a way that can be done in various different areas. So what we're going to do, Paul Oakley, one of our colleagues is on. He's going to explain how he set up the rules, and the team set up the rules for doing the audit of the O&Ms. Yeah, but that's all configurable, and therefore part of this exercise, which I'd be very keen for you to get involved in, Vic, is applying that knowledge, because you know what you need, don't you?
Definitely, but also as well, I mean, I think I've talked about that before. It depends which model you're using. If you're using Copilot, or you're going to get a different result, even if we've got, the same prompt. So how do we get over that? And are we prescriptive in which one we're going to use?
Yeah, and that's really part of what that's why we've got some technical people on as well, which we can come on to. I do want to move on, but I also want people to carry on talking. So
yeah, can I just say on the progressive validation, which definitely we do need to do, and it will pick up where there's no information, but often the wrong information is put in. So it's just like, oh, we don't know what to put in there, we're going to put this in, and you look at it, it's not even what you've got on site, so how you get around that, I don't know. I mean, that's probably not going to be sorted by AI, is it? I don't know. So that's a question for the group.
Yeah, Pierre's got a point on that, I think.
Sorry,
I can see you bursting there.
Yeah, no, Victoria, one of the things that the AI will do is start looking at the exceptions, and that's where we really need to be, is doing the predictive part early on to say, that's not acceptable, take it away, or quality checking actually happening ongoing, the little bits and pieces as you string it together. But I do think that you asked the question there, would it be on Copilot or another AI? And what we do need to do is actually find the best feature set that is going to give us the kind of certainty that we require, particularly because it's an incremental process. We want to make sure that that consistency is also part of the prompts that we're putting together, and that would give us very quickly a small toolbox of sharp tools, which helps considerably for everybody's sanity.
Thank you. Definitely. Yeah, Tim.
Right, thanks. Yes, okay. So I'd like to pick up on this because I think there's a misconception over how we use AI. I mean, if your experience, I can understand this, is if your experience is purely from the interfaces that are that people use in the browser at the moment. But if you're a developer, then you will be using a different range of things. So, for example, I use AI inside my programming environments, and I use two different types. And the one that I use inside Visual Studio, which is the GitHub Copilot, allows me to select from a range of models that come from different organizations. So I could use the Gemini one, or I could use the ones from Anthropic, which is Claude, or I can use the ones from AI, which is predominantly the one that Copilot actually used, because it's the deal that Microsoft have. So that's one point. The second one is that when I was first started doing this a few years ago, I said I said, oh, here's a product data sheet. Tell me what a Uniclass 2015 classification should be for it, and it came back and it looked pretty right. It looked until I looked it up, didn't exist. So I thought, right, okay, so what do I need to do? What I needed to do was say, only choose from this valid list. And that's what you can, and that's the more sophistication part of it, is that when you build an agent, what you do is you start building in a whole set of things. So the agent looks and says, well, I can only choose from valid ones, and I must make a decision based upon what information that I have now. And I may actually come back and ask more questions. It depends how you build it. But essentially, we shouldn't be limiting ourselves. It's just one prompt, like a search engine, and that's it. It is actually it is now getting a lot more sophisticated, and I'm trying to build some examples so that I can show people how this works. So that's one of the things. Then the other one, which was mentioned earlier, which was about if the problem is insurmountable, the subcontractor is going to just disappear, then the job of pulling that information together, maybe it should always be in the management contractor's remit to pull together, so long as because they're on site, they are seeing the things go in. If they don't know, if they've not been supplied with a data sheet for a particular product, surely they should be able to go and actually look at it and get the information, so they could fill those holes in, and they should be recompensed for it. So the money that, instead of it going to the subcontractor, goes to the management contractor. So if that is the problem, then there's got to be a solution. That's all I wanted to say, George.
Especially if the 360 photos.
Oops. Absolutely, yeah.
John.
Yeah, just to pick up Tim's point, but in the real life construction, all the subcontractors are very conscious. Am I getting paid? I'm not going to release the information until you pay me. That's the thing. You know, I've got to be careful. I can't just give in everything I know. Thank you very much. Goodbye, Tim. You know, that's it.
Yeah. And
you go bust. Another thing is that the designs changed. You know, their dependency, the original design intent has changed dramatically. It's one subcontractor introduce a system. The ripple effect, other subcontractors will be affected. Therefore, delays, redesign, rework, and someone will suffer down the line. And that's how you're not getting, you know, the ultimate information. And plus the principal contracts, especially the tier 1 contractors, they're professionally trained how not to pay people. That's the Wild West, you know. So that's how you get into this, this shithole situation. Excuse my Chinese. But the thing is, what I'm suggesting, George, is can we bring in the decision maker, like a client or even lender? They are the driver of the whole process. Because at the moment we have AI this, AI that. We just solve this, we develop little tools to solve the symptoms, but the root cause is still there.
No, yeah, without doubt. And I think the important thing is that what we've got as a collective here, we've got 40 or 50 people, and we're part of a bigger group where we've got a voice. So rather than it being that you, for example, talk to your client or whatever, we've actually got a collective voice, and it's not you just trying to get commercial advantage. It's actually because it makes sense to everybody to do it. So that's why I'm trying to pull this together as a community voice. for that. And the point you've made about change is I think a really important one. And I think it's the heart of why a lot of the O&M information is not fit for purpose. And it's because people have changed things along the way. And nobody's kept anything up to date. I was talking to Franco yesterday, and we were talking about something dead simple. Space. A space reference. Yeah. So you've got a space reference that starts at the beginning of the project, or fairly early on. You as an architect, Chun, you would probably be the owner of the space referencing. But then
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, you do hope so, don't you? But then everybody should be using that same space reference.
Forever.
And all of the different parties that are involved right throughout the life of the job, and actually after it's been handed over, should be using those space IDs, right? Now, we accept the fact, acknowledge the fact that people will change the use of space, or they'll change the names of spaces, or they might split two spaces or one space into two and things like that. But that shouldn't affect the ID of the space. The people get confused by the difference between the unique ID of a space and its name. And it may be that you've got several different names during the life of the job, but the original ID should be consistent, I think, and that's what we should be following. Gordon,
just add one thing. The procurement. That's down to the procurement problem again. If the JCT design and build contract, if I'm novated by the principal contractor, I'm not the employee of the principal contractor. So if they want to change, so I'm gonna be careful. There's conflict of interest. I got clients, was my previous employer. Now the new employer, I need to bend over to the new employer. So therefore, the change might be compromised. Will proceed, and the original design intent will be compromised due to the cost implications.
But the client, or whoever it is that's the decision maker, the ultimate decision maker, needs to recognise what the implication is of what they think is a simple change.
Oh, the developer, the contracts are very clever how to justify things, pressure on the program, the cost, and then the client will give in.
But why?
The client,
okay.
The client, just a whole number of things that are coming in, so many in my head that are I'm getting carried away with them all. But literally, change substitution by the M&E and MEP. So I'm in the M&E piece. So change substitution is driven by cost equal and approved. Right, but that's not done by two separate parties. It's done by the one party. So if they deem it to be equal, hence in there, it's approved. Now, I go back to when I started, somebody had to approve it. Now, at the same time, with the Building Safety Act coming into play at the moment, we are definitely seeing an increase of what we call technical submittals. And that basically means that the contractor, before they even place the order, they want to get approval for our product before they can place the order. So that's a sea shift back to make sure that there's evidence back to the right product is procured. But at the same time, Chun's point about contractors falling by the wayside, if we don't get paid, and they slip away, and I'm not paid for equipment that's on the site. And then Tim was saying, well, pay the main contractor. The main contractor gets paid. He just doesn't pay that subcontractor because he's no longer there, and I lose out. So somebody then phones me and says, can you come and commission this piece of equipment? You're hell I will. I've not been paid for it. At the end of the day, what in the right mind would tell me that I'm going to commission that or give them the information for that piece of equipment that I've supplied that somebody's robbed me of in the process chain? But at the same time, when I'm credit checking some of the contractors, they don't have as much money in any one of you in this room.
Yeah.
They should not be appointed because they are not financially stable to procure a job of hundreds of thousands of pounds of mechanical services. So who's complicit in that?
Yeah.
The thing I want to go back to is, who is the client? During the construction process, the client is the main client, the main builder. He thinks he's the most important until he gets practical completion, and then he doesn't give a hell, apart from his reputational damage. And and even then, he's not given a bother. The project director's probably more concerned about his reputational damage because he goes and joins another big tier 1 contractor, and then the whole thing slips away. Final point. I put a slide on there. We're talking about data and how breaches of systematic data tells you there's an issue. I've just put a graph out to all of you. And forget about what it's about in the small world of corrosion monitoring, okay, which I do have a commercial vested interest in, so I'll make that out there in the place. But it just tells you when it breaches the level that you would be safe at. And I don't mean safe in the sense of life critical, but if hot water bursts above your head in your office, that office is going to be empty for a long period of time. Think about the cost of that to a client, okay? But if you've got a breach way back at the start of practical completion and the builder's desperate to get off the site, he doesn't want you to know there's a breach. So what does he do? He buries it. He unplugs the device. He does not want you to know about it because he doesn't want the problem. And if it becomes an irritant to him, he doesn't want the problem. And if anybody wants to challenge me on this, delighted, come on board. But there's only certain proficient major tier 1s, and we've had this conversation, George, in another section in PFI and healthcare, that are basically saying I've got to get some data because I'm in trouble if I don't have data.
Yeah.
And we're probably going to do something about it. George and I are having a conversation about it, but it's just to give you an indication of long-term systematic data telling you that something's going wrong. And then you can start the questions. You can question the contractor, and if he doesn't have an answer, sack him, because he's not competent to give you a solution to the process, because he doesn't understand what the drivers are to the process. Forgive me. I get very emotional and quite impassionate about it.
Can I also
Gordon.
just echo what Gordon was saying, because I think that it also has another implication in that very often, because the whole assembly of different contractors and different people is an adversarial one, and is a one that's overshadowed by risk and financial concern, that what we're talking about with data is accountability in a different way. And actually, many people don't want accountability. They want it to be vague. They want it to be kind of unknown, because it means they can win in that equation and that they don't lose in that equation. So it's often very difficult to pin people down and to make everybody accountable, because it's better for many of the parties if there's no accountability, if they can just blame the client or blame the FM or blame someone else.
Short-term vested interest as well. There's very much short-term vested, and in addition, change comes with a considerable amount of nervousness, and innovation comes with, people see it as a threat. People don't see it as a simple process. They get very scared of it. And
Gordon, yeah. So Matt, I'll come to you just in a moment. I just want to pull this back onto. Well, really, we've got a lot of people on this. Some people are new to our group, so therefore you may have come on here expecting to have a training course on AI. We will be showing you some things that we've been doing, but I think the conversation, I hope everybody agrees, I think the conversations we've been having up till now have actually been really quite important, because what we're actually talking about is why we need it. And not so much just AI, just much better information. And if we can understand, and we're getting some fantastic examples articulated here of what the need is, and that's why it's so important that we've got clients involved in this and engaged in it, and also people that are non-technical people that want to know what they want to know information for a purpose, then we can come on to that. So we've got a couple of presentations, very brief presentations that I want to bring in. Franco's going to talk about the work that we're doing on collecting tasks, so standardizing tasks. Paul Oakley is going to explain how how he went about defining the rules that then Tim actually used as part of the process of producing the automation. But Matt, can I just ask you to step in now?
Yeah, no, sure, George, and hopefully it ties up some things. The kind of principle I'm out with things, we're really lucky on a new build, on a capital project, because we get to create data from scratch. And we get to define how we're going to use that data and be able to think about sort of AI models that can sort of utilize that. Now, obviously, that's still not brilliant, but end of the day, we are far better than we were 10 years ago. But I still think there's a huge issue with the kind of end user bit. The place you want to build is only good as the end user who's going to use it. Now, some of the engagements we've already having with our kind of asset validation route services is we were looking at some drawings the other day, a 20-year-old building. Between the schematic level 1 and level 2, the risers were all different sizes for exactly the same thing. So we have no idea exactly what size that riser is. So this bit of being able to use the kind of AI tools to validate what's correct. I mean, and this could be for delivery as well. It could be looking at drawings to make sure that that pump there is on this schematic here, but it's also got an O&M reference here, etc. But also this bit of potentially if some minor works would happen on a retained estate, and then all of a sudden you've got to go through all of your documents and all your drawings to work out now what is not relevant that you might keep within your, I'm not going to say CDE because it's probably OneDrive, whatever, but you know what I mean? All this sort of stuff, then you've got to go as an asset owner to go through all of your stuff to find out what is now not relevant, to be able to make sure your information is still good. That's going to feed back into the LLM to produce decision making after. So this is why I'm kind of at this bit of all these nice stuff that we can do is brilliant, but until we've got a good foundation, it kind of feels still very far ahead, in my opinion.
Absolutely. So I think that feeds into this quite quickly. This is something that we've been working on for the last couple of months. What we're trying to do is turn the golden thread philosophy concept into something that is tangible and business based. So what we would, this document here has been put together by a team of us to then look at the golden thread, not simply as a compliance thing, but actually to say what the business benefits are. Because what we've discovered is that in many cases, the senior directors aren't aware of their duties. And because they're involved in actually signing off budgets and things, it's no great surprise that we've got a problem. So what we've done is broken down the different elements of the golden thread into 9 stages, being able to define at the outset what's needed, and then to be able to gather the information and audit it right the way through. We've actually put together some benefit statements. So if you're working as information managers and you want to basically articulate why investment's needed, then we've got this as a document that we can share. And one of the things I'm going to ask Franco to do, what we're working, as I said earlier, with Mo from Mortar, and his platform is used by a lot of contractors to produce task information delivery plans. So we thought it would make sense to actually define what the tasks are, and then to be able to use that. And this is the key point here. What we've done is gone through and done some analysis of what the benefits are, the financial benefits and the risk reductions. So this group here, we've had a very active conversation. Some of you have already had this document, this white paper, and commented on it for me, for which I'm very grateful. If anybody else is interested in this, then just put white paper in the chat, and we'll send you this draft copy of it, and then hopefully you can take a look at it and give us some feedback. Franco, I think that segues quite well into what you're going to cover.
Okay. So I have been asked, and I will be very happy to do this, to coordinate this task collection, analysis, and reporting exercise. I wanted to show you a slide that hopefully will convince you that this is a really good investment. So I'm going to share my screen, and I have one slide, don't worry, just one slide. And here it is. Oops. So, as I said, this piece of work, we call it task collection, analysis, and report. So what will happen? Whoever of you wishes to contribute will be asked to provide an input either in the form of direct input into this database called Morta, or in the form of Excel, which will then be made suitable to be fed into Morta. So let's call this the collection stage. Very simple, very mechanical piece of work. What will follow is the analysis of this data. So we will create this important shift from a set of raw data into a set of organized data. And this analysis, the complexity and the magnitude and the importance of this analysis is being defined in these days. And then we will finally get the benefit of this exercise, which is, if you wish, the return of your investment. So George and I and others are working on the method and on the technicalities of this exercise, and whoever wishes to participate, I think that the buzzword is
Put
tasks.
your name in the chat.
In the
No,
chat.
sorry, put tasks in the chat.
Tasks.
Put
Okay.
tasks in the chat, and we'll
So
include you.
have I been short enough, or?
That's perfect. That's absolutely
Okay.
perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, what I would say is that all we're asking you to do is set down the tasks that you already do. Yeah. So we're not asking people to think outside the box too much here. We're basically saying, if you're involved in the process of helping define what information's needed, just set down as tasks what you do to do that. Or if you're doing an inspection or a handover, what tasks do you do? Because then we can actually capture using that and turn it into a common language, which is what Franco's trying to do.
If I may add one word, I've been short enough so I can get 5 seconds. It's not only what you do, but what you must do, because you have to comply with some standards.
Absolutely.
Finished.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so the next person on stage, I think, is Paul Oakley. Paul, are you there?
Yeah. Show the screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep, can. Perfect.
Okay. Right. So we've been going through doing a process for a number of clients over the last few years, reviewing O&Ms, mainly from the asset management point of view in terms of things they've been handed over. And the methodology, quite often they would receive a massive big zip file with loads of documents, etc. in it. And we basically go review the structure of the folders and the files, produce schedules of all the deliverables that have been provided, and look at things like the file types, the nomenclature, in terms of trying to produce attributes and tags so that we can find information much quicker and more efficiently. And we can also identify where there are gaps and things are missing. We've also, within particular O&M, sort of work packages, etc., gone through the contents of those, and then I looked at reviewing those against identified criteria and structure. Now, some of that, I mean, I'm from an architectural background, and some of it we've had to pass out to other people, such as the M&E, who we need specialists in those disciplines. And depending on the projects, again, things have had to be passed out to others. But from that, we basically produce a snagging list of what the O&Ms and then summary reports of it. But this is, it's quite an arduous task and takes a lot of time and effort. So some of the work we've been doing with Tim is sort of helping improving that process. So when we start looking at things like the structure and nomenclature of folders, where things are, and the file formats and that. You know, just basically looking at a schedule of all the documentation provided, we were then able to use the AI to actually go through the folders and say, are all these documents mentioned within the O&M documents actually been provided within the folder structures? Okay, and you can see that, you know, there's quite a few things actually were missing from them. And then things like how many files actually provided, in this case 25 files, had 0 bytes. Yeah, so we had the empty folders as previously mentioned, but then actually you also get the empty files, so the provider of the file. And then there are files also where, again, you open the file and actually the contents is another project and bears absolutely no resemblance to what it's supposed to be talking about. But you know, that's another sort of big issue with it. So one of the things we talked about is having a standard folder structure. This is what is provided from within the O&M manuals, which is basically a load of numbers, which means nothing to anybody. So we tried to create a standard folder structure in terms of how we can move things into that and move that stuff on. We then looked at sort of the traditional O&Ms in terms of how the things are there and what the sort of issues are. So things like requirements for locations, where they're using references of it's inside, it's outside, it's on all floors, it's not known, not applicable. These sorts of comments which come in, or references to things like see drawings, and then there's no reference to what those drawings are, or reference to a document, and even they don't exist. So these sorts of things again were as an arduous task for us to actually go through and manually check. But actually, this is where things like the AI is suddenly able to help and deal with that. But traditionally, what's been happening is all this information's just been passed over to the operations team, and they don't check it, they don't validate it, and it when things go wrong, it causes chaos. So
could I just contribute something on that very quickly, Paul?
Yeah, sure.
One of the first projects that we did, we opened it up and we found that there was a bolster drawing that had been viewed, and all of the tags, the bolster tags, were overlapping each other. So you couldn't see, even if you had the reference, you couldn't see it because there was half a dozen different tags on top of each other. So I went back to the contractor and said, this is useless, but I wasn't as rude as that, but how would we use this? I think I said. And he said, well, I don't know. He said, but the client signed it off. So I went back to the client and they said, well, we didn't see it. And it turns out it was the employer's agent. So I spoke to the employer's agent who was tasked with doing this. And she said, well, we didn't look at the file. We didn't look at the drawing. That's not part of our scope. We were just making sure that there was a fire stopping drawing. And I think that sums it up, really. And the other thing, I don't know if you're going to mention it, Paul, but in the zip files, some of them were longer than Windows. Are you going to mention that?
Well, that was sort of some of my issues on things like the nomenclature, and so it's either file formats, so things like produced in photographs, JPEGs. So again, this is where issues with the AI, because actually we can't OCR them and get the data, or there were stamps over the top of things, as George has mentioned, on other things, so you can't read information. So there's all these sorts of issues with the actual documents that they produce and how they're provided. So actually making sure that you have things in specific formats that you can actually turn back into data and validate. Within the structure, you then had the issues in terms of when it had come out of the extranet systems, it had taken things like the file name and the description and the status and the suitability. So the file names have suddenly expanded absolutely enormously, incorporated all sorts of special characters, again, which and then actually was too long to either go into a zip or to allow the zip to be unzipped. And then you also had the issues of nested zips within zips within zips. You know, all these basic things which actually stop you being able to get to the correct information.
I mean,
So
our first effort with this is probably 2 or 3 years ago, is when we then were unzipping those files, as Paul said there, some of them were the file length was so long it couldn't actually read it. But I don't think we even got an error message on that. It just left it out.
yeah,
So that particular document, which could have been a really important document in the zip file, just didn't appear. So you don't know it wasn't there. Yeah. So yeah, crazy. Sorry, Paul.
yeah. So when we actually started looking inside the particular packages, we created this sort of review template, which basically had a standardized O&M structure. And what we've realized is, as we've gone on other projects, that structure needs to be amended depending on what the project is. But actually trying to agree an identified structure identifies or helps in terms of automation, in terms of the checking of it. And then also identifying the particular criteria against each section. And then you're carrying out the review of that section against the identified criteria. And from that, we're then creating a snagging list, and then we can produce high-level overview reports, etc., to give you some sort of background on it. Yeah, we've already talked about this sort of thing, but against all of the content we went through, and we produced this sort of list for each of the O&M packages. And then there was a massive big red document that went to the client to basically say there was about 6 things that did comply out of 17,000.
Sorry, carry on, Paul.
Yeah. So in terms of the sections, we set out these standard sections against the things that we wanted and how them to work. And then we then produced the guidelines for them, which were then passed to the contractors in terms of what they need to be provided. But then within our reports, we'd validate, is there something there, yes or no? And then are there issues with it? And then we'd identify those. But we define all these criteria, which was initially for the manual audit, but then Tim basically took that on and then wrote his rule sets in terms of how he could basically validate using AI against those to see if it actually could come up with similar results. And that was sort of the process that we went through to do on that. Now, really, the big thing is defining what this AI criteria is. So there's the criteria that you need for the general health and safety file, but then there's also the specific work package type criteria. And then you need to then get down into what is mandatory requirements, what's best practice, and then what are the questions to identify if particular criteria applies. So you may have particular asset types or systems or which may or may not exist within a particular scheme. So you need to be able to identify if these systems exist, if these asset types exist, then these are the criteria that needs to be applied to them. I know Franco's keen on his testing of criteria. So there's a whole series of different testing things that need to comply if you've got particular things in there. So actually understanding all those sorts of things are absolutely crucial to providing the information that the AI engines can then basically pick up to carry out this validation that we need to do.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, so if you feel as though if you've ever looked at an O&M and tried to find something and not got it, then I would have thought that you would be interested in this. If you feel as though you can contribute to what the rules should be, then just put O&M in the chat and we'll include you in the discussions on that. So just put O&M in the chat and we'll do that. I'd like then to show how we actually used what Paul's shown there. Is that okay? So the principle we took, as Paul said there, we took a zip file, and we've got a routine now that we can run over this. So if you've got a project where you've got a zip file, we can then automate the initial review of it to identify whether it's actually got the files in it that it says it has. So and we're learning along the way with this, but this is a really powerful way of doing that. So it's a quick snapshot to find whether it's got the information it needs. This is the results of the process that Paul was just showing there. So this is the manual review. And this took probably about 20, on this particular job, it's quite a big job. It's about 25 man days to do. So substantial piece of work by people that are, experts to be able to say, do we have the maintenance requirements? Do we have the spares policy in there? And were there any as-built drawings? What were the issues? What were the snags in that? And that produced a very quick report from that exercise, which then was used by the client of the FM team to feed back to the main contractor and say, look, actually none of the work packages, there's 54 work packages, and none of them were actually fully delivered. Now, it may be, you may argue that some of those things aren't important, but that's the point at the beginning. We can set that criteria out, and this is an automated process. What then Tim did was actually created the prompts based on the information that that Paul's team had put together, and it then automates the outputs. So you can then say what's passed and what's failed. And we've then tried to apply that to what the business impact is. And also then using that, this is more data engineering, to basically compare what was in the BIM model, what was in the COBie data, and what was in the schedules. And Tim, do you want to just talk to that for a moment?
Yeah, okay. So very simply, on the top is what was supplied as the COBie deliverable, and on the bottom is the schedule that is extracted out of an O&M. Because if you've ever tried to read a big long schedule in a PDF file, you know just how ridiculous it is. So the data on the top is really taken out of the federated model. So this is where the disconnect comes between what was actually installed and documented as to what was intended, because the BIM model wasn't updated. Not only that, we checked the asset information requirement, and it clearly stated that all tag numbers were to be supplied, and yet the COBie data didn't include it. And now we can't access the. I created some documents of that, and now you can't access the asset information requirement anyway. The other why is this important to keep these things tallied together is because once it got to the manufacturer, who was then putting all this together, one door type that was in the design intent now becomes 7 because there are subtle variations. So you've now got a disconnect. The other disconnect was the fact that the manufacturer's spreadsheet concatenated the space code and the description. So I know if you know Excel, it's easy to then split that out if you can see the pattern, but you shouldn't have to. Okay, next one. So that's what it looks like inside. Oops, that was what it looked like inside a PDF. So it just illustrates the absurdity of incorporating these large spreadsheets inside a PDF. Why didn't they not just provide it as a spreadsheet as well? I wouldn't worry if it was in the PDF if it was also out, because when you extract from PDFs, you are running a transcription liability. So you have to then do some sort of sanity check on it. But anyway.
I'm going to skip on, Tim.
Yeah.
So
then also we've just got different spreadsheets for the, they're door schedules, but they're all different formats. Now here's a really critical one, which is the quality of the drawings themselves that were produced from a BIM model, yet the door numbers, they'd not checked to make sure that they weren't replicated. So they were replicating door numbers that were supposed to be on different floors, and you could spot it quite clearly because the coding system said it starts with a D, it then says the floor, and then says the door number. Yet D02 appears on several different floors. So you've got a mismatch there as well. So if somebody came along 5 years later and they tried to look at the schedule and to find out what the door ironmongery was on a particular door and use the drawing, then the chances are if they picked that particular door, they'd be going down a rabbit hole that had no end. Okay. So obviously we can see all these then visually inside our spatial model. Because we can then connect all these things together. So some of these things are actually discovered during this process. And then what we can also do is underlay the drawings, and it clearly gets highlighted there.
Okay, right.
Last one, George, here's the other absurdity of this, is that when you've got a fire strategy or compartmentation drawing, and it identifies the doors, there's no door numbers. So you wouldn't know whether that was a timber door, an aluminium door, a steel door, or made of paper mache. You just wouldn't know because you'd have to look at another drawing. It's just absurd that this is, why is this? Those are quite clearly important parts of the compartmentation assembly.
Okay, so I'd like to give a couple of minutes to Carl Magnus, if we can. Carl? Or is he gone? Maybe it's had to drop off. Okay. Tim, are you able to, have you got anything live you can show?
Yeah, I was just going to show what we've been doing with, again, connecting data up. So, so if you've been on any of the other things that we've been showing, we've got this healthcare data set. And so what I've done is I've imported that into Mortar. And then what I've done is then create I'll just bring up Claude Desktop. I've then created what's called an MCP server, which basically allows me to connect via Mortar's API so that I can then, I think it's this is the chat, I can then query that data set. So these are some of the questions that I put in. So obviously, if we just spin down a bit there, put into that. So I can say, right, how many, hopefully it'll just connect. That's what I hope so. How many issues relate, I've not asked this before, relate to Windows? Okay, so, and this, it depends how, it may take a little bit of a while, but it'll clearly give you an idea that you've now got these sort of things working in the desktop. Okay, and now we've got a result. Okay, so that's reading the data that actually is on Mortar. It's not on my machine. So that's one of the things I wanted to show. The other thing I wanted to show was let's see, this is so this is a Windows shell. Oops, just there's that, and it's a CLI, what they call CLI, which is a command line interface. And you can install these. There's one for Gemini, which is free. There's one for Claude, which is Anthropic, and there's one for Codex, which is from OpenAI. And there's another one, but that will involve loading it in what's called WSL, which is a Windows Subsystem Linux. But it's a shell, and it's what these things can do, they can actually access the files on your machine. They can, but every time you do something, you can set it. You can say, "Do you trust this folder?" Do you trust me to read this folder? Do you trust me to write to this folder? Do you trust me to create documents, etc.? These things are used a lot by programmers inside their programming environments. But this is like the sort of the secret. It's not a secret. It's just the thing that people who are using AI through the other interfaces would never get to see, because it just looks a little bit complicated, and it is going back, 30, 40 years or whatever, but in fact it's very powerful, and it's very interesting to do, because it's just in a window. But this capability of being able to also use you can use tools like MCP servers, but you can access files, so you can say analyze these files or these photographs and put them into some sort of category, and it'll reorganize things. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, so again, we've just got 10 minutes left. What I'd like to do is just see if the community, if you as a group are interested in what Tim was just showing there, which is basically analysing and understanding what goes wrong in buildings. So maybe put in there help desk. So if you're interested in participating in a conversation around help desk and how we can analyze the information for doing that, and maybe somebody that could engage us, or that you could provide some help desk information, that might be something that maybe some of the landlords are involved with. So as I say, if you find that interesting, and put help desk in. I think the I can't remember, somebody had their hand up and I've lost it now. Was somebody looking to speak? I can't remember.
It was me, George. I was just going to pick up with Tim when he was saying that, a door set had a defined number. Just as I speak as a manufacturer, sometimes what happens is when we get a schedule of individual items and we're selecting something that's completely bespoke, but the parameter set that is specific for its performance is very, very alike but different. So the actual location of that product needs to go in a set location to define its location. But when we're making all of these multiple items in mass numbers, we basically batch a whole raft of them that are doing the same performance. The only variable would be, again, I'm MEP, sorry to technically terms, we just change the flow rate. It's like a radiator. So rather than having 15 sizes of radiators and a contractor having to determine which radiator goes where, there's 15 of them of the one size. He just needs to set it to a different volume, effectively, that goes through the radiator. The output will be different to the specific room, but the radiator on the schedule from the purchase order might be R17. So that's where you get the replication of that R17, radiator 17, multiple times, or D4. I don't know if that's relevant, but it came to mind, Tim, when I was kind of coming across. That's where the contractor might use it. It's maybe not correct. It should have a subset on it or something. But it's all about, if people are thinking about the information out with their box for it to be visible to somebody else, they would do it if encouraged to do so. But 9 times out of 10, go back to the comment that I think Kevin mentioned earlier on, they just don't. They're in their bunker mentality, and they're actually not invested to do it. They don't really care.
I think the point I was trying to make, though, Gordon, was the fact that this inevitably is going to happen. You got so you need to accept, yes, you will do it, because in the door manufacturing industry, of which I've got very little knowledge, and they will say, well, we're going to make all these doors, and then we're going to put the different ironmongery sets on. Therefore, we need to make sure that we've got this methodology of doing it, and we're going to generate the one schedule out of it, and therefore we know, well 5 of these doors have got the same ironmongery, so they're the same, but they've and this is where then they create these little differences. But the fact is that's not a problem. It's the fact that the Kobe data didn't reflect it at all. That's the problem. So it's what do you trust? And I always trust what came closest to handover, which is installation. We're looking at commissioning data, and again, the commissioning data is there, and it says, "Oh, fan call units," and here's the different settings for it. But we've now, because it was signed, it's now an image inside a PDF, so it's useless to you unless you go through this process of extracting it, which now, and I look at it and I go, I can now give that to the AI to do.
So the point about that is coming back to what Pierre was saying right at the beginning, and that is that what we need to do is make sure that the information requirements say that we shouldn't just be having a schedule. If there's a signed schedule, we need actually the information that was signed in a native format, so that we've actually got something that can be interpreted without, for example, nines being recognized as G's and things like that.
Yeah, we've got that one now as a data table, George.
Yeah, Tim,
there's loads of examples though.
Yeah, so we're just about to finish. So what I've done, I think the point is we've got it's fantastic the responses that we're getting here. In order that we can direct you in the right way, what we're doing is running 15-minute sessions. Some of you have done these 15-minute sessions with me over the last couple of weeks, but I've put the doodle poll in again for 15-minute slots. Just a brief understanding of what specifically interests you, and then we can we can navigate you to the right information. I would also come back and say that we really want the tasks to be completed, because that, I think, is a cornerstone of what we're trying to do. So if you've not put tasks in yet, you've not decided that you want to do that, then probably we pick up later with Franco. But yeah, and if it's the case that people don't think that they need to, we should be doing it, and we don't do it, we just drop it. But I want to give you the opportunity to do that.
And I can anticipate you that I know many very nice jokes if you talk to me.
Okay, cool.
Italian jokes.
Good. Okay.
Okay.
So has anybody else got any observations before we close? Goodness me, for once we're finishing early. Oh, Tom.
Yeah, I just thought I'd jump in before you close up, but it was interesting seeing the sort of reviews you were doing on the O&M information, and I think for me it's more curiosity around when you've undertaken these sort of O&M reviews, what sort of the response been like off the back of them, and what sort of the following conversation after that with these companies have you found?
Well, in principle, what we've been doing is doing it for the building owner, or the people that are taking responsibility for the building on behalf of that. So therefore, the first thing is to make sure that they're not taking over liability for information that is already wrong. Yeah, because that now is very much a statutory responsibility in many of the cases. The next step is to how it gets fixed. Now, I think actually how it gets fixed is less easy than people think, because you go back to the tier one contractor, who's probably the contractual relationships with, and their supply chains disappeared. I say they've disappeared, they probably haven't disappeared. It's just the project has disappeared. So therefore, those connections, but they are the route to those supply chain members. So, but clearly the best way of doing it is to get the supply chain members to backfill the information. I mean, the best way of doing it is to get it right at the beginning. But then if we don't have that, which is really the exercises that we're doing at the moment, we're reverse engineering things. So therefore, ideally, it ought to be coming from the original authors to correct it. But they may not be around. The insurance guy had a really interesting point, and that is that when you take out insurance for other things, you're only insured when the additional documentation that you say you're going to provide has actually arrived. So I think that's an interesting point, that it may be that the insurance side of things for either the client or the tier one isn't actually properly in place until it's actually been verified. So that perhaps gives a mechanism to do that. But what that does do, to do that, is you actually need to define at the beginning what that information is. So we've got Margaret.
Yeah, our standard responses on review of O&Ms, I'm just putting it in the chat so you can see, as a result of that wonderful work that you and Tim did for us, that you see our standard review responses, it's clear that you've not reviewed these O&Ms, and as a result, please review them properly and resubmit when they're all complete, as a result of that wonderful work you did for us. So, if anything, we've had such an interesting outcome, knowing that the tools that you provided are able to not just quickly review O&M. Sorry, Margaret Saki speaking here. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I've just put it in the chat there. That's our standard response now. It's not good enough. We're not even getting the right building, let alone the right. God.
Yeah, so just to explain, Margaret is with UCL, and they've got dozens of projects going on at any one time, probably hundreds actually, but they've got dozens of projects going on at any one time, and the process is that all of that supposedly tested information and checked information goes through to one of Margaret's colleagues.
He was here earlier on, but he had to leave.
Yeah, Patrick, he's actually the custodian of the O&Ms.
Yeah.
Right. But he's getting so many of them, he can't possibly check them all. And also, it's not really his job to check them. So what we're trying to do is develop an agent that then can automatically check these things for him, certainly within reason. So if you've got any O&Ms that you want checking, then maybe just put O&M checking. I think probably we've got enough people that have put O&M in the file, but I should have been a little bit more explicit. I think O&M checks. So if you've got any, Vic, for example, with you at Wythenshawe, if you've got any projects where you've got O&Ms that you'd like to run through the process, then let us know. O&M check. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Much appreciated.
Gordon.
As we reach the weekend, I'd just like to wish Franco all the best in the rugby against England. And I'm sure I've got everybody's support as Scotland challenge the favourites, France, at Murrayfield. So, thought I would just reach out to the whole audience. I know how brethren we are across the nations. So all the best, Franco.
Got to challenge France.
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Apologies for being flippant.
Okay.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye.